things, so I'm going to be doing a little more reading this evening.
Me too.
As I said, we have a fair amount of registrations. It was over 60. And it just like really makes us so happy when the library first had to shut down and we had to start our program virtually. We had no idea how we could do it. We didn't think anybody would be interested in joining us. So, just to start, this program would be nothing without the participants that we have and we continue to build. So thank you so much for joining us. With that said, because we do expect a decent group of people tonight, you are muted, but when it's your turn to talk, when we do the Q&A, definitely unmute yourself because we want to not just hear your voices, but see you as well. Thanks again for everybody coming tonight. I'm Linda Hewitt, and I am a staff member at the Red Bank Public Library. And one of the goals of the library that's extremely important to us is our commitment for diversity. We hope that our staff, we hope that our collection, and our patrons reflect that. We're part of a consortium of 31 libraries, but if there's a particular item that you would like to see in the Red Bank Library, let us know. I mean, we can only get better when it's collaboration. While we acknowledge that this program is certainly not always easy, we applaud you for being a part of it. And we hope you tell your friends and we get more people and more communities that have conversations like this. We've sold ourselves as a country for all. And honestly, it's never been like that. From the beginning of time with our indigenous people, white people have always been the privileged race. The fact that so many participants are willing to have this conversation and move forward, as difficult as it is living today, some of the horrific things that keep happening have come more into focus. And like for that reason, I feel like I have hope that maybe we can build a better country. Often our program focuses on racism regarding the Black and white communities, but systemic racism is across the board and it affects all of us. The New York Times wrote about the time that we're living in now. Quote, large numbers of white Americans have attended racial justice demonstrations, purchased books about racial equity, and registered for webinars on how to raise children who are anti-racist. Some have asked themselves pointed questions, like how much professional advantage they have garnered from being white and whether they would willingly cede it if they could. Others are going to tattoo parlors to cover up images of Confederate flags, swastikas, and Ku Klux Klan symbols on their bodies. The truth is, we can't move forward today unless we address this issue. I mean, as horrific as the pandemic is, in some ways, this is even worse because the way we've been, governing Americans' lives has to change. So one of the things we've said in this program is, oh, well, you can blame it on organizations, but what can we do as individuals? So one of the first things is to recognize the unconscious bias that we all have and ask yourself, tell yourself that you're a racist because there's a little bit of racism in every single one of us. The other day, I heard a story about a minister whose name is Pastor Ron Buford, I think, and he's in Sunnyvale, California, and he started a racial anonymous group. And he's like kind of, worked it in the same way as Alcoholics Anonymous, and they begin every single meeting or program by focusing on the individual and saying, I'm Linda Hewitt, I'm a racist. And, that in itself is like such a hard thing to do. But his feeling was that this was really important, that people address their biases. And this has really been quite a movement. And they have, I think, 50 churches now in 22 different states that have started racist anonymous meetings using Buford's model. So the second thing you can do, educate yourself about your country's, the true history of America. Read, watch, listen to multicultural stories. Check out what the library has to offer. I can't, we're constantly trying to build our collection, and everything we have there is free. So that's, something to take advantage of. Take the time to understand the history of racism. You'll gain a better understanding of how we got to where we are today. The United States history, when written by white people, began when Christopher Columbus discovered North America. Remember, we're a capitalistic country, so use your money as the third thing to change things. I don't know about you, but everywhere I go, I see Amazon trucks. And if you go into your local community and go out of your comfort zone, if you're white, don't go to maybe the white stores that you go to. Go to a bodega, go to a multicultural, business, give them your money. That in itself sends a real message. So I would just like to say that Joe Ritaka, who I believe is with us tonight, sent out a list of Black businesses that were and are still open. I would be happy to share that. And if anybody would like to build a list of multicultural businesses, send it to me. This program only is as good as, we can build it to be. So if you have any ideas, anything that, you would like us to discuss, focus on, help us, we'd love to hear from you. And with that said, tonight's program is about race and religion. We could do a whole year on that subject, but we don't have that. For tonight's program, we're really going to focus on what does it mean to be a Christian? And we have three wonderful panelists, and they will be sharing their stories, and then we'll open it up and have everybody ask their questions. Please put things in the chat. And I'm going to turn it over to Kerwin Webb, who is not only on our panel tonight, but he also is a part of the Let's Talk About Race committee. And he's also president of the local Red Bank chapter of the NAACP, along with all kinds of other things. Kerwin?
Thank you, Linda. So this portion, we'll just go over our Zoom guidelines for tonight, just to make sure that we have a program that the listeners can hear, where the presenters can present without distraction. So first thing, we'll ask that everyone who is not speaking or presenting at the time, please mute all of your computers and phones. That way we don't pick up background noise or feedback, and that everyone can be heard. Also, we would like for you during the Q&A portion to be seen as we're dialoguing. And video works best if your computer is on a desk at eye level, so that we can see your face as you engage. There are a couple different views you can look at on your screen: speaker view, that allows you to see only the person speaking, or gallery view that will show everyone. I think that when our presenters are presenting, I will spotlight them so that you will only see them, and you can be focused on what they are saying in case they say something very interesting to you. If you have a question or an issue, use the chat, and once we get to it, we will address those Q&As, or the panelists may respond to what you say then, but know that there will be a significant portion of time where we will open it up for Q&A, and we want you to engage. We ask you to be thoughtful in your responses, that you be gracious in your listening, so that we can hear what people have to say. And if there's a question or a misunderstanding, please ask for clarification, as opposed to assuming the worst. We all are here to learn and grow, and so we want this to be a safe place. Also, tonight's program is being recorded. If you would rather not have your face shown on a recording, you can turn your camera off, but please know, for posterity and for others who may want to watch the program afterwards, we will be recording. Finally, we create this to be a safe space. We deal with difficult issues. Race and racism is a difficult issue. Anytime you introduce faith, religion into it, it gets more complex. So we will carefully navigate those lines, but one line that we will not cross, do not want to deal with tonight, is partisan politics. The library is a nonpartisan organization. So are organizations that I work with. And so we will not, we will ask that we refrain from any partisan politics. We invite difficult conversations, but along the area of the program, which is race and racism and religion. With that, I will introduce you to our moderator for tonight, Claire Phelps.
Thank you so much, Reverend Webb. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you to our panelists as we explore our topic for tonight, love your neighbor. Conversation tonight will be led by the Reverend Diane Ford, and I will give you her background. She is a second career pastor at Lincroft Presbyterian Church. She went to seminary at Union Theological in New York City. And prior to pastoring, she worked as a musician in Sacramento, California, performing and teaching in academic, religious, and community settings. She came into pastoring as she was awakened to the white privilege bubble she was living in. And our next presenter is Minister Kerwin Webb, and he is the associate pastor of youth and young adults at Second Baptist Church in Asbury Park, New Jersey. He serves, as was said, as the president of the Greater Red Bank NAACP. He graduated from Princeton Seminary in May of 2019 with a Master of Divinity degree and was a 2018 Sacred Sector Fellow with the Center for Public Justice, which is an independent, nonpartisan organization devoted to policy research and civic education. In addition to these roles, Reverend Webb, Minister Webb, is a member of the board of directors for the T. Thomas Fortune Foundation and Cultural Center. He's adept at facilitating difficult conversations while encouraging a deeper level of engagement. His goal is to challenge listeners and attendees to become part of the solution because he believes that in this time of realignment and change, we can collectively build the bridge to better. And then the Reverend Rashaun Booker is currently the pastor of Antioch AME Zion Church in Linden, New Jersey. Okay, they truly believe there in the power of prayer. He was called to ministry in 2010 and began his humble walk at his home church, Shrewsbury Avenue AME Zion in Red Bank, under the leadership of the late Reverend Donald P. McDougall. While holding a number of roles at his home church, he also served as chief of staff and minister of church growth and evangelism. He's also the executive director of learning and talent solutions at a global financial firm. With over 25 years of leadership in training and program development, project management and design, he uses his skills and talents to support and uplift the kingdom of God. Focusing on excellence, he loves to inspire, help others reach their maximum potential, and his organizational and leadership development ministry, SMILE, S-M-I-L-E, helps to teach people to use their smile to help others. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. And now we will start with Reverend Diane Ford as our first speaker on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to do a little something here on my computer. I think this popped in my head right now just to mention, and I've said this to my congregation quite a few times. You know, it seems like during this time with all this divisiveness, people should be pounding on the doors of churches saying, you guys are the experts about this. Please help us. And sadly, we're not the experts about this, but that is what our faith is all about, is exactly how to work within a reconciling world. Just had to throw that in. So I'm going to start. I just want to say one brief thing about the bubble, the white bubble. that I've lived in. When I was in seminary, it must have been, I think it was the first semester actually, I was in a large classroom, and I was kind of back here and way over there on the left in the front-ish area row, African-American student. And he was like, I don't know, in his 40s, said something that opened everything up for me. And whatever the discussion was in the classroom, I don't remember, but what he said was, I really try to have hope for the future of my children, that they'll live in a better world, but it's really hard for me to have that hope. And I was like, what? What is he talking about? And that was it. That was it was one of those, epiphanies. Just wanted to share that. So tonight, what I'm going to do is focus actually on one of my professors. So at Union Theological in New York, the late James Cone was one of my teachers, one of my professors. And James Cone, if you don't know who that is, put Black theology on the map. And so I'm going to share basically from a book that he was writing at the time when I was a student of his, and sharing some quotes from him. And I'm focusing on, the moral imperative of Christians regarding racism. The name of the book, I want to make sure that I'm at the top of this, you guys. Thanks. Just bear with me for a minute here. Okay. His book is called The Cross and the Lynching Tree. And I hope at least somebody out there knows that book, if not his name. And before I get into it, I want to talk a little bit about the cross and lynching. Most Christians do not really know what goes into a crucifixion. And I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of helped educate probably some people about that. The crucifixion, the actually being on the moment of the cross, is actually the last step in a crucifixion. There's all this other stuff that happens, all the torture that happens before then. And likewise, most Americans do not know what goes into a lynching today. The part of, actually being hanged is just a part of all the other steps. And so in his book, he's drawing a connection between the lynchings and crucifixion. The point of the ancient way of crucifixion was to terrorize the people, keep the people under control. It's a warning. You probably have heard that the Roman roads would be lined with crosses of people that have been crucified. It's a shaming, it's a dehumanizing. That was the point. Besides the torture, it was just a very shameful thing to say that someone in your family had been crucified. So in America, with our lynchings, the same kind of thing. It was to terrorize the people. Don't compete with my business, or else you'll end up on a lynching tree. A difference between the ancient crucifixion and what we have in our American history is that crucifixion was actually an act of the state. It was the act of the empire. So it was part of the government. That's not what lynchings were. Often what it was someone would be taken on their way to jail, and a mob would show up and snatch them away to take them off to be tortured. So here's some quotes from, this is a little dark, I realize that, but it's important. So here I'm going to start with some words from Dr. Cone from his book. Like the lynching tree in America, the cross in the time of Jesus was the most barbaric form of execution of the utmost cruelty. In the lynching era, between 1880 and 1940, white Christians lynched nearly 5,000 Black men, women, and children in a manner that with obvious echoes of the Roman crucifixion of Jesus. Yet these Christians who were doing these things did not see the irony or contradiction of their actions. So one of my questions, why are we humans so blind to the evil that we let happen around us? Yeah, that's one of my questions. And there is, I think, a lot of psychology behind that. And one is everybody likes a winner. The earthly life of Jesus and how he taught us to live our earthly lives was not about winning. And this is clear in his parables, this is clear in the way Jesus lived his life. Jesus goes through defeat and despair and death, and then also says, to follow me, pick up your cross and follow me. And most of us, even though we all know that scripture as Christians, it's like, what? Pick up your cross? No. We want to win, you know. So we, whatever that means, and move on. Another quote from Cone: suffering and death were not supposed to happen to the Messiah. The Messiah was expected to triumph over evil, not be defeated by it. These are some of the truths that I think Christians are so slow to really see, even though it's obvious. He goes on, how could God's revelation to humanity, you know, this Messiah, be found connected with the worst of deaths, the vilest death, a criminal's death on the tree of shame? And by the way, those are ancient quotes regarding crucifixion. So a response to that question of his, how could this be that the Messiah would be connected with such a vile thing? He goes on, and I think this is a response to his own question. The gospel, the good news, gospel means good news, right? The gospel of Jesus is not a rational concept to explain in a theory of how salvation works. The gospel of Jesus is a story about God's presence in Jesus' solidarity with the oppressed, which led to his death on a cross. That's a lot of words. I'm going to say that again. The gospel is not a rational concept to be explained on the theory of how salvation happens. The gospel of Jesus is a story about God's presence in Jesus' solidarity with the oppressed. That's what led to his death on the cross. He goes on, what is redemptive is the faith that God snatches victory out of defeat and life out of death and hope out of despair. The gospel of Jesus, the story of God's presence with the oppressed, we aren't drawn to that. Why would we want to be in solidarity with the oppressed? We want to be winners. Everybody wants to be okay and safe. When Jesus comes to be baptized, this is a beautiful scene. Jesus doesn't come and say, hey, let's have a coronation for me. No, he's walking along with all the other people along the side of the river. And that is the image of this Jesus. And what does that say about the Almighty God? And I think in our American culture, we make Almighty God untouchable. Some of that language around king can be just so misleading. Jesus did not come to be king, an earthly king, but we like that image because it's strong, when actually Jesus was all about being humble. Jesus was all about not suffering for suffering's sake, but suffering because to embrace the oppressed, to embrace the marginalized. So even though many of us Christians don't really get that or are uncomfortable with that kind of life, those who do get it are those who have, on our own journeys of suffering and defeat and despair, we've chosen to walk as Jesus does. Hence that line, pick up your cross and follow me. And it's not about torturing ourselves, but about a non-violent way of living. It's a perspective, it's a grounding of love for all. And that's fierce love. It's not soft love. This is fierce love. And what Jesus and the others refer to in the New Testament is the unity of humanity, the unity of all creation. So that is our grounding. I'm going to go on. I'm not sure how many minutes I have left. Can somebody give me a cue on that?
2 minutes.
2?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So I'm going to just go to some more of him now. Okay. Torture in lynchings. So this is back to Cohn's book. While white mob violence against African Americans was an obsession in the South, it was not limited to that region. White supremacy was and is an American reality. Whites lynched Blacks in nearly every state. Wherever Blacks were present in significant numbers, the threat of being lynched was always real. Blacks had to watch their step, no matter where they were in America. A Black man could be walking down the road, minding his business, and his life could suddenly change by meeting a white man or a group of white men or boys who on a whim decided to have some fun with a Negro. And this could happen in Mississippi or New York or Arkansas or Illinois. By the 1890s, lynching fever gripped the South, spreading like cholera, with as white communities made Blacks their primary target and torture their focus. So this next paragraph, I'm going to give you a trigger warning. There's some gruesomeness in the next section here. Burning the Black victim slowly for hours was the chief method of torture. Lynching became a white media spectacle in which prominent newspapers announced to the public the place, the date, the time of the expected hanging and burning of Black victims. Often as many as 10 or 20,000 people, men, women, and children would attend the event. It was a family affair, a ritual celebration of white supremacy, where women and children were often given the first opportunity to torture the Black victims, burning Black flesh, cutting off genitals, fingers, toes, and ears as souvenirs. Postcards were made from the photographs taken of the Black victims with white lynchers and onlookers smiling as they struck a pose for the camera. They were sold, these pictures, for postcards for 10 or 25 cents to members of the crowd who would mail them to relatives and friends with a note perhaps saying, "This is the barbecue we had last night."
Oh,
The cross and the lynching tree interpret each other. Both were public spectacles, shameful events, instruments of punishment reserved for the most despised people in society. Any genuine theology and any genuine preaching of the Christian gospel must be measured against the test of the scandal of the cross and the lynching tree. Jesus did not die a gentle death like Socrates with his cup of hemlock. Rather, he died like a lynched Black victim or a common Black criminal in torment on a tree of shame. The crowds shouting, "Crucify him," anticipated the white mob's shout, "Lynch him." Jesus' agonizing final cry of abandonment from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" was similar to the lynched victim, Sam Hose's awful scream as he drew his last breath. "Oh my God, oh Jesus." In this case, it was a cruel, agonizing, and contemptible death. And then one more paragraph from Dr. Cohn. And this is about the symbol of the cross. And I skipped talking a little bit about my cross to save time, but maybe we'll get to that during questions. Unfortunately, during the course of 2,000 years of Christian history, this symbol of salvation has been detached from any reference, this symbol meaning the cross. This symbol of salvation has been detached from any reference to the ongoing suffering and oppression of human beings. You hear the irony, and yet it's so obvious. That's my comment. Going on. The cross has been transformed into a harmless, non-offensive ornament that Christians wear around their necks. Rather than reminding us of the cost of discipleship, it has become a form of cheap grace, an easy way to salvation that doesn't force us to confront the power of Christ's message and mission. Until we can see the cross and the lynching tree together, until we can identify Christ with a black body hanging from a lynching tree, there can be no genuine understanding of Christian identity in America and no deliverance from the brutal legacy of slavery and white supremacy.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Ford. So much to think about and such powerful words. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we will go on to Minister Webb.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Reverend Ford, for that introducing us to James Cone and sharing that that history. And as you were speaking, I wrote down the word intersectionality, and I looked it up because as you were talking, there's so many intersections and so many areas of overlap with Dr. Cone when he was writing, but also people before him. And in my presentation, I'll share some writings that I think are crucial. Intersectionality is defined as a concept often used in critical theories to describe the ways in which oppressive institutions, and in parentheses it says racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, xenophobia, classism, and on, the way that these systems, oppressive institutions, are interconnected and cannot be examined separately from one another. And so even in our discussion, our brave discussion, thank you, Patty, Linda, and the library for taking on this topic, because it is not easy to really examine critically a person's faith. But as James Cone wrote about the cross and the lynching tree and the similarities, it shows two sides of the same coin. Whereas for lack of, for white Christians during his time, they saw the cross as this salvific figure, but at the same time, the cross was a lynching tree for Blacks because crosses were burned in the lawns of churches and homes. And so it's a peculiar relationship that the Christian faith has with white supremacy, with the history of America and racism. And an author that surprised me, that spoke very well to this, and I'll read some of his writing, was Timothy Thomas Fortune. And this is an intersection for me because as I sit on the board of directors for the Cultural Center and Foundation, I am struck by his writing in the book Black and White. And it was published in 1874, and I will read a couple of sections. Starts on page 9, it says, history, the record of human error, cruelty, and misdirected zeal furnishes no more striking anomaly than the British Puritan fleeing from princely rule and tyranny and dragging at his heels the African bound in servile chains, praying to a just God for freedom, and at the same time riveting upon his fellow man the gyves of most unjust and cruel slavery. So he's talking about the colonists that would come over fighting for liberty and religious freedom from the oppressor of King George, while at the same time becoming oppressors at the same time. Fortune goes on to say, a parallel for such hypocrisy, such sacrilegious invocation is not matched in the various history of peoples. I'm going to skip down to page 14. He says that the part played by the ministry of Christ, remember this is 1874, the part played by the ministry of Christ in the early conflict against human slavery in this country would be enigmatical in the extreme, utterly beyond apprehension, if it were not a matter of history that the representatives of the Christian church in conflicts with every giant wrong have always been the strongest supporters, the most obsequious tools of money and power, and the political sharps who have imposed their vile tyrannies upon mankind. They have alternately supplicated and domineered, crawled in the dust, or mounted the housetops as occasion served, from Pope Gregory to the Smiths and Joneses of the present time. So that it has passed into a proverb that the ministers of the gospel may always be counted upon to take sides with the strongest party, always seeking to conciliate King Cotton, King Corporation, King Monopoly, and all other kings of modern growth, swaying like the reed in the wind to the powers that be, whether of tyranny reared upon 1,000 years of usurpation, military despotism of a day's growth, or presumptuous wealth accumulated by robbery, hypocrisy, and insidious assassination. Instead of leading the reformation of Leviathan wrongs, the ministry waits for the rabble to applaud before it commends. It was not in this manner that the great Christ set the world uprooted, long established infamies, and prepared the way for ultimate redemption of the world from sin and error. I think what Fortune was basically saying is something that if we examine today, the totality of the Christian witness is that Christians are late to the party at best, and tools of oppression at worst. Now, someone who I've spoken to about Christian responsibility made a statement to me, and it stuck with me, that not all Christians are created equal. So it's not easy to say that this is a Christian based on this and this is a Christian because they're in the same church. No, it's the individual and the work that they do and the following of Jesus Christ, the picking up of their cross and their carrying it. And this is echoed in scripture as well. And then I'll be done because I look forward to questions and answers and comments. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1. This is Paul as he is about to go on to glory, speaking to his understudy Timothy. It says, "You should know this, Timothy, that in the last days there will be very difficult times. For people will love themselves and their money. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents and ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. They will be unloving and unforgiving. They will slander others. They will have no self-control. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends, be reckless, be puffed up with pride, and love pleasure rather than God. They will act religious, but they will reject the power that could make them godly. Stay away from these people." Now, the good thing about it is that this is nothing new. We've seen it time and time again. Any Christian who's read their Bible and believes the words that it says will recognize that you always have this dichotomy of those who call themselves Christians. And the way that you judge a Christian is by the works that they do, not the words that they say. That's what we need now. That's why, even with the oppressive nature of Christianity towards Black people, you still have Black people who fall on this faith and know that it sustains them. It's because there is power in the belief and the acting out the scriptures. There are those who wear the Christian jersey because it brings riches, money, fame, power. And those show themselves. And scripture tells that those people will show themselves in due time. It is our job as those who profess to be Christian, those who claim to be Christian, to live out the works, the ways and the works of Jesus so that others can see and know the difference. That's how we can tell what truly thus says the Lord. My first class in seminary, and I'm done, I promise. Professor Nancy Duff, she opened with a question. This was after some incident in our history manifested and people were divided. People of faith were divided. And she said, I will never presume to say that somebody doesn't believe the God that they say they believe. But she said, if I see these acts that you do, and I know that they are in contradiction to the Bible I read, I don't doubt that you believe in a God, but what God do you serve? And so that would be the question that I would ask for those who support oppressive structures and systems, those who are silent in the face of ungodly wrongs, is what God do you serve? It is the God, is it the Palestinian Jew Jesus of the Bible, or is it the God of money that America has lifted up on a pedestal? I would be happy to discuss this, and I love your questions when we get to the Q&A part. Thank you for the time.
Yes, thank you so much, Minister Webb. Thank you, thank you. So many wonderful words and the sentiment. So now we will have Reverend Booker speak.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here this evening. I have a billion thoughts running through my head. If anyone knows me, knows that the thoughts are now all over the place after listening to all of that. And so while I had some things to say, I'm actually going to switch that up because I intentionally want to be provocative, right? I want for us to start to begin to think about some things, and very, very interested in your questions and your thought processes around these particular things. And so what I'll say here as the provocative statement is that Christianity is very compatible with racism. Why? I think because number one, it's run by people. We are people. We are running Christianity, and we have a problem with accountability, right? And so as I continue to push the bullet here, one example, for instance, is when we talk about things like knowing the Bible for yourself, right? Someone was making a comment earlier on when we opened up that people don't often know the history of slavery or racism or even the Bible. We don't take accountability. So when we talk about how things are happening from a racial perspective and the injustices that occur, we're not equipped at taking our own accountability. But even from a biblical perspective, I think I can even extend that into some things. And this is also not a popular thought, but again, just trying to be provocative here. The school systems, when we look at the curricula that's created, we create people who grow up to only want to listen to some leader. We're creating workers. You're going to go out in the world and you're going to work and you're going to do that under a leader, and you're not going to question any of that. But I was lucky enough at an early point in my life for someone to say to me, even when you're in school, it's really important for you to, after the teacher teaches you something, go out, learn it by yourself, do the research, come back, ask the question, challenge the teacher, obviously in a respectful manner. But that's the kind of thing that creates independent thinkers. And when we look at our school system, we're not necessarily creating independent thinkers. So that makes it easier for someone, some person, some leader to say, hey, here are the ideas. And then we have people running to that and say, yes, I just believe it because that leader is the person that said it. We don't have our own accountability, right? And then we have people who also, I think this contributes to when we have the racial discussion, is there are a number of people who are just masking as Christians, really kind of that same point there, but they're masking as Christians. My mother was a Christian, my father was a Christian, my grandmother was a Christian, therefore I am a Christian. I know nothing about the Bible, but I'm still a Christian. And so this is how it starts to become easy for people to still be racist and be a Christian, right? Where's the accountability there? And that's on that self accountability. And then there's kind of the accountability on the leadership, on the pastors. Many pastors who have gone to seminary, for instance, they have Bible studies. And in Bible studies, we're using some type of workbook, or we're going in the Bible and we're going with our kind of own conversational type styles and things like that. But those who've gone to seminary know how to do what's called the exegesis. And they're looking at different criticisms and picking out the certain pericopes, right, in order to examine the text. But in the Bible studies, guess what's happening? We're not teaching anyone how to self-serve. We're not saying, hey, come to Bible study with a Bible dictionary. We're not saying, hey, come to Bible study with a concordance. What is that? I had someone ask me, hey, Reverend, I was reading in King somewhere, they said he rent his clothing. And I'm pretty sure they didn't rent clothing back in the day. They're right. It means they tore it. But how would they find that out? Right? We're not teaching people the Bible. We're not teaching people it to the point where they can go off and figure these things out themselves, right? I'm going to follow whatever it is that you tell me. And then another thing that's really, really unpopular as well. And don't attack me if you see me in public, but sometimes baby boomers, let's say, if we look at it from a generational perspective, baby boomers have a tendency, not every baby boomer that's out there, but baby boomers are of the general mindset, hey, I went through this and so will you, rather than let's not have this generation go through what we've went through, but let me help and be there to fix it. It's the general type of mindset, right? So when we look at these kinds of things, it helps all of the people that we're growing. It helps all of the people that we are raising up not have a certain accountability to learn certain things for themselves. And so when concepts like racism come up, a lot of the times I'm just following someone else. So I'm bringing this up because I think there's a lot of work that we can do. We all don't need to be supermen and superwomen, but we can touch the people right in our inner circles, right where they are, right? And we can do that in some of those different areas by taking those actions and just being able to show love. Because that's in essence what we're called to do. The Bible is a love story. I think we get so caught up on all of the sins that God showed us, right? Oh, this is a sin, that is a sin, this is a sin, that is a sin. That's not to say, that's really not to say, hey, I'm going to use that against you. But it's more so to say, I'm pairing that with the statement that we all sin by thought, word, and deed. So what does that mean? You are not to judge this person. You are not to judge that person. They are not to judge you either, because we are all sinners. But we're covered by God's grace and mercy, right? That's why he sent Jesus. And so when we claim to be Christians, but are in essence Christian atheists, right? This becomes the issue. I was reading a book that's actually a book called The Christian Atheist. And it had given the example of there was a pastor in a church and they wanted to kind of build a liquor store across the street. And they didn't like that. So they decided to protest. And the pastor and his congregants would go out and they would protest because they did not want the liquor store to be there. So then they began to pray. And they were praying that the liquor store be removed. Next thing you know, there was a crash of lightning and the lightning burned down liquor store. And so the owner of the liquor store decided to sue the church, took them to court and said, hey, they burned down my church. The pastor, the congregants, no, we didn't burn down his church. We didn't burn it down. Why? Because they felt like, hey, we didn't actually do it, but his point was that they were praying to a God, and that God, no matter what, burned down my liquor store. So he wanted to sue them. But that's the power that God has. And we as Christians have to remember that we still have that same power. But we absolutely have to believe. So when we go around and we're touching people and we're having conversations, what can we do in the simple things? We don't have to save the world. Not everyone necessarily is called to be a civic leader, right? Out there, an activist, but we can do certain things here and there, right? So that's my time. So looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Claire,
Very good. Thank you so much, Reverend Booker. Thank you to all of our panelists this evening. So many wonderful words and so much to take in, and words to live by, words to think about as we move forward in this journey. So I believe that the next order of business is to have some excerpts from Emmanuel Acho's Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. That particular segment is on race and religion.
Yes. So before we go there, are there any outstanding questions? We could take maybe a couple before we go to that. That somebody, let's see.
yeah, we have pastors lead a congregation. How can they inspire love? How can they inspire accountability? Anyone want to
Okay.
take that?
Anybody would anybody like to answer that particular question?
I'll take it.
Okay.
So one of the things that I actually recently started doing, because it's one of the things that I think is so important. I was having a conversation with my son, who is a college student. And we're looking at things from a church perspective is really, and I think it's one of the most important things is, how do we reach people where they are in order to show them the love? Because I think that's where we need to start. And so there's a social media venue, which is called TikTok. And in essence, I am joining TikTok for Lent. Why? Because I think we can pick up some things sometimes, right? Having those conversations and making sure that we meet people, even the young people, where they are, learning this technology and touching them, and being able to get to the places where they are and having those conversations with them so we can show them love. I think it's really simple when we are, I'd say it like that, showing love in the very, very little things. Showing interest in someone says that, oh, this person at least is caring enough to do these kinds of things. That's how we, begin to show love. I think that sometimes we think about that we have to do so many things that are so dramatic, but sometimes it could be a call. We talk about it being actions, right? And so what is it that you're doing? Did you pick up the phone and call somebody? You could text them, right? And like I said, what I'm doing, I'll get on TikTok, right? And I'll do whether a little dance or whatever it is, but I'm still making sure I'm bringing the Bible forward, whether it could be a verse or some inspiration, or saying, hey, I'm showing you love. Hey, just smile today and have a wonderful day. Those are just little things that we can do that really begin to touch people and inspire them.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Any other questions? I think someone had a comment regarding Reverend Booker's statement about the baby boomers
Yeah.
She mentioned that not
Kerwin,
just the baby boomers.
right. The younger generation is learning that sad
Bad.
attitude.
As
Yeah.
well. Right.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It looks like Joseph has a question.
Yeah, I want to point out a book that speaks to what you folks are talking about. It's called Faithful Resistance by Rick Ufford Chase, a Presbyterian thought leader. But the challenge that he puts forth, which I struggle with, and I think it's a challenge for churches to take that step, is I think he pretty much paints the picture is if we become the church that Jesus wants us to be, white church, I'll talk about white churches in this particular case. A lot of the whites are just plain going to leave. So he paints the choice of being this smaller, relevant church or the current church. That's obviously a hard choice. I'm wondering if any of our pastors think we can somehow make this transition without such a loss, or whether that loss of attendees is maybe just what we got to do.
I'll respond to that. Pastors are always worried about the size of a congregation. And in fact, in earlier times, that's the way you kind of took the temperature of how your ministry was doing. How many people are there on Sunday morning?
Mhm.
You know, which obviously, as we've heard, I mean, really, is that what it's about? My comment, my initial thought is, you know, the participation in congregation churches is on the way, I mean, way down. So what have we to lose? It's like cut the, what's that term? You know, just get rid of the extra baggage and be the church. And it's scary because when churches get smaller, they can't afford full-time pastors. Maybe they can't even afford a pastor. But again, okay, be the church without pastors. Yeah.
And then what's our mindset when we think about this topic? What is our mindset? Because it's something that actually needs to be shifted. Me, I have a small church, right? It's a small congregation and we have 8 people. But when we look at through the pandemic where we were not able to gather as a congregation, and I started posting sermons online, the amount of people that I can get that are watching the sermons and commenting can exceed 500 people. And that's just for me. I'm not advertising, doing any of that. So if the church, period, already was just the body of Christ and not the building, the numbers actually grew. So what's our mindset and how do we continue to shift into being the digital church? I think we need to think about those types of things as well.
I have thoughts about that, and I think it goes to exactly what you said, Reverend Booker, that if we go to the body of Christ in the church, if in the conversations that I have with the people that I have conversations with, I demonstrate Christ, then the church has expanded. It has grown. No, I haven't added any names to the role. No, I haven't added any money to the budget. But if I believe the Bible that I read, and I believe the Jesus that I'm supposed to be following, then God is able to do exceedingly and abundantly above what I can ask, think, or imagine. Because it is God who works in me to will and to do those things for God's good pleasure. And so it is not for me to work. And I say this all the time. I am not a senior pastor, so I do not have to worry about managing a budget or a building. But I think that makes me, sometimes it makes me seem like I am unconcerned about those things, but really those are temporal things anyway, because my job is to plant the seeds and then let God do the work. And I think that's where people will follow. I think where people are falling off is I don't understand why I continue to come here and give my alms, give my sacrifices, but I don't see anything in return. right? I don't see the church being what it needs to be. I don't see the church changing the community or the world. And so that's why I'm questioning what these people are saying. But when you find those churches, those small ones where you have 8 or 10 people who are doing ministry work, the funds, the resources come because people God honors your sacrifice. God takes your little and makes it a lot.
Mm.
That's what I think.
Mhm.
Now, if there are no pressing questions or thoughts, we can go to these video clips. I have a few that I've picked out. I'll show a few, like a minute or so of the clip, and then we can come back, have a little discussion if we need to, and then go on to the next one. But remember, Q&A is a part of this. So if you have questions, stop us and we can shift to your question or your thought. We will.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay.
Welcome to another episode of Uncomfortable Conversation.
I have to share my sound too, sorry.
The sound was shared.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Well, at least we heard it.
Yes, we did hear it.
Yeah, but you needed to check those 2 boxes.
Welcome to another episode of Uncomfortable Conversations with the Black Man. Now, historically speaking, the most powerful person in America is a religious white man. Well, more specifically, the Christian, or should I say Christian white man. I'm joined now by Carl Lentz, lead pastor of Hillsong East Coast, a church with nearly 10,000 members. Carl, how are you, my friend?
I am blessed to be here, and I'm frustrated that you chose that shirt just to make me feel worse about, everything I got going on. So thank you for having me.
The trick, Carl, buy smaller shirts, they make you look bigger.
This is as small as you can buy them. This is just medium.
I love it. Well, look, let's dive into things because you're a lead pastor at a phenomenal church, a church I've attended. I know that America, we are religious people, generally speaking, and religion, it teaches you compassion. It teaches you empathy. It teaches you sympathy. But I recently read that compassion without confrontation is like fruitless, sentimental commiseration. So, Carl, I am here to have a uncomfortable but compassionate confrontation and conversation. Segregation in America, outlawed mid-1960s.
Right.
However, every Sunday morning in houses of worship, America is about as segregated as it ever can be. Why is that?
Because of the stuff we've said, it's hard to listen to a preacher preach if you know that preacher believes in systems that are hurting your people. So it's safer sometimes to go to a black church, especially if you're a Black American, than it is to go to a diverse church. Keep in mind, that's the biggest air quote of all time. Because I don't know if I can trust somebody who claims to love Jesus and professes to teach me about this man, yet you're silent on issues that hurt my people. You're silent when I need you in areas that I'm, desperately oppressed. And I think that's why people are like, you know what, it's cool, I'll try to reach the world, but on Sunday, I need to be safe.
Why is the, generically speaking, why is the white?
So, our church is there to make us safe. And what do we think about that first interaction? Anybody? Go ahead, Joe.
I can certainly say that within my church and my church community, often when I try to bring about issues of social justice, I get pushback in a number of ways. One is, let's not be political, which is bogus. I try to explain that, but that doesn't work. And then I get the broader one, which is a little harder to deal with. I come to church to be safe. I come to church to escape. The world out there is nasty. I come to church, I feel safe. Please don't mess that up. And that's a challenge.
Thank you, Joe. Patty, did you have your hand up? Were you going to respond?
Yes, I guess what I wanted to say, that's an interesting observation you had, Joe. And I've seen that many, many times. I think there's one reason, there's so many reasons of why this continues, but one reason is people, let's say white people, resist is there's a need for self-reflection, and people take any opportunity to do that. They'll sometimes take it as a criticism, but the most important thing we can do is speak the truth and hear the truth. And if your friend, neighbor, fellow congregant, whoever is suffering on any level, don't we have a responsibility to, at the very minimum, listen to stories, hear them, and show a little empathy? That's all I want to say.
Yes.
Kerwin, we also had a comment that churches are a place for recharging for the week.
Yeah. Any other thoughts before we go to the next clip?
Yes, something else that I think is maybe a little bit provocative as well. We often look at the oppressed as the hurt, and they are. But I also think, guys, if you're a white person and maybe there are some racist tendencies or whatever the case may be, what happens so often in the way that we as people approach that, it begins to make a person feel threatened. And when you threaten a person, no matter what it is about, there's a fight that wants to come out. There's something that I want to protect. And so I think it's a sensitive topic because we only tend to teach about it and talk about it from one perspective, but do not allow the other to have a perspective in the conversation. And that's not right either.
That's true. And based on the other comment, the person said churches are a place of recharging for the week. I don't know. I think that some people feel that, well, I'm coming here to recharge. I don't want to be challenged. This is not a place that we will deal with something political or something too painful. I'm coming for myself to recharge so I can go on about my week. So I don't know. I think sometimes that's the feeling as well.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And then someone mentioned the program that came on Channel 13 about the Black church. And so for the Black church, right, that was your everything, really. And so it is one of those things, right? I'm going there to recharge. But on the same hand, I'm going there because we're going to talk about politics. I'm going there because you're going to educate me on some things that I didn't know about. It was the everything. So part restore my soul through the word, but also have the difficult conversations, right? Make me uncomfortable so that I can grow closer to you.
Larissa?
Yes. I just wanted to address the Sunday morning comment with the churches being segregated. I know that when I was growing up, that was certainly a thing. I was blessed to grow up in an area that was pretty mixed, and I have friends of different races and faiths. And we kind of used to laugh because on Sundays, like we would wave at each other as we were driving. They were going to their church and we were going to our church. And it was kind of it was a thing back in the 80s and 90s. 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning was the most segregated time in America. And then with the advent of the mega church, I felt like a lot of Black people were leaving our Black churches. And I don't know that I believe that 11 a.m. hour was at the time still considered a segregated hour in America. I just felt like churches, especially with the mega churches, were becoming more and more integrated, and people of different races were actually worshiping together. Well, within this last year, we've had a lot going on with a lot of different movements and civil rights issues that we've experienced in the last year. I actually watched a program where they were saying Black people were quietly leaving those mega churches and returning to the Black church. And the reason why I thought that was important to say is because I think it's kind of a sad thing. Because I think what happened with the mega churches had so much to offer that smaller churches couldn't compete with. So people went to these mega churches, and at the mega churches, we kind of, and I hope not to insult anyone, but we kind of just said everything's happy here, and we didn't deal with the real life issues. We dealt with what was good and what we had in common, and we didn't deal with what was really going on. So now we're in a place where people have issues, especially people of color, with dealing with the things that we're seeing on the news every day and things that are going on in life. And we have churches that aren't dealing with how we feel about those issues. And I think that it's caused some people to migrate back to Black churches because of that. So I think it's just an interesting thought of where we were going and where I don't know if we're still going anywhere, going in that direction because of recent events that we've had.
Thank you.
Kerwin,
Thank you so much.
we have a comment from Valerie Brett.
Yes.
Valerie, do you want to say it or do you want me to read it?
I'm happy for you to read it.
Okay. I think for many people, church is a place that allows you to be bad in your everyday life and then ask for forgiveness when you go to church. This dichotomy allows people to continue to act terrifically, but insist they are Christian. I want to add to this that, something that hasn't come up tonight are many of the white supremacists who, they actually justify their behavior because they're Christian.
Yeah.
And, again, that's another whole topic, but I don't think that we can talk about religion and Christianity without, acknowledging that there's a whole group of people out there that say, oh, I'm a good Christian. And meanwhile, and they have before and would continue really to be lynching people. So that's as provocative probably as you can get.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I jumped through
That's
that
true.
in there, but
No, but
That's okay.
that's good.
One second.
That's a very insightful
Let me do a
observation.
time check. It is 8:17. Our program officially concludes at 8:30, but if the
Okay.
conversation takes it and you guys are willing, we will stay on a little bit after
Yeah, we're happy.
the discussion.
Okay.
All right.
So
Let me go.
should we
Let me
You
go.
wanna
To,
do
proceed with
another
what
clip?
you're saying? Another clip?
yep. Okay.
Too much work. This is what happens with racism. The moment you start looking into this, you realize, oh wow, this goes all the way to the top. This is in our church choir. This is in our church administration. This is in the way we've taught the Bible. And there are a lot of Christians who set out to clean house until they find out how close to home it might come. So there are people who would rather just almost, you know, when you have guests over and you put some of that stuff in that one room.
In that one room.
We've been doing that with racism for decades in the American church, at least as far as I know. And that stuff's starting to overflow now. And so you're faced with two types of people who genuinely want to be a part of the problem, or people who are genuinely upset that they got caught. That's the funny thing about racism. Some people are sorry right now because they're racist and they need to change. Other people are sorry because they got caught being racist. They don't want to fix the problem. They want to fix the optics of it.
So then, would you say that racism and prejudice does in fact exist inside the houses of worship?
No, the moment you set foot in church, all that stuff vanishes because of Jesus. I'm kidding. You're about to throw me off your show. I think, in fact, it could be said that churches might be one of the biggest propagators of racist ideology in our country.
That's what
From
exactly.
the operate.
So let's talk about that. Churches, the biggest propagators of racist ideology in our country. Let's use our emotions. Do we agree with that? Use emotions. Thumbs up if you agree, thumbs down if you don't. And Joe says sort of kind of. Sometimes, maybe not. I say thumbs up.
Me too.
And check this out. I'm gonna try to match Reverend Booker in being provocative. The racist ideologies, not just exclusively in white churches either.
No, exactly. That's exactly right. That is exactly right. And that's why I'm saying coming to that point, I'm like, hey guys, what about the other side?
Yeah. Let's
Right.
open up the floor here. Let's share comments, questions. There's stuff in the chat.
Yeah.
Chat here.
We have something from Lester that says, expanding on Valerie's theme, many people go to church, make their contribution as far as monetarily, and think it absolves them from their behavior throughout the week.
Yeah. It's true.
That's what a lot of people have been taught about the grace of God, right? You can do whatever you want outside, but as long as you come and you're on the roll, you pay your tithe, you ask for forgiveness, then it's all over. And now you can go back out and do it all again.
Mhm.
So why is that? Is that because we're not really teaching about sin and hell these days? Could that be why? Because at the end of the day, I don't care if I'm on the roll and I'm paying my tithes. If I'm going to hell, that's a bigger issue than feeling good about myself every week because I'm attending church and paying.
I would say yes, that's part of it, because in some of my seminary classes, there was conversation about whether hell actually exists or not. Reverend Ford, I see your hand up.
Diane has her hand raised, Kerwin.
All right.
Okay, Reverend Ford.
And now I have to remember what it was because I'm so intrigued with everything that's happening. Oh my gosh. Okay, come back to me.
Okay.
Once it comes back to you, just jump in and we'll get to you, okay?
It also has been said that many church leaders look for contributions instead of changes in behavior.
Well, yeah, because if you challenge me too much, I stop giving, then you lose your parsonage, your house, your salary. And for some people, or, in some people's cases, their jets, those things.
Yeah.
All right. We ready for the next clip?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. I'm going to skip a little bit here.
Parent could ever know.
What would you say, because you've been out marching and at the protests, to the white person who's like, I feel uncomfortable being out here among Black people because I'm not Black and I don't want it to seem disingenuous. What would you say to that white person?
Welcome to being Black in America, to being the only person who doesn't really know if you fit in. That's called everyday life. We have the choice of whether we want to be in a protest and be uncomfortable. You do not. You woke up Black today. You didn't get to choose whether people were going to accept you, if people were going to tolerate you, if people were going to look at you in the eye. That's your reality every day. So even the notion that we get to pick and choose when we want to invade this conversation is, in essence, racism at its finest. I get to go home after Brooklyn, and we get to go home to our house in our safe confines. But the people who live this, they don't get to go home because racism traveled.
Here's what frustrates me. Let me be real with you.
Be real.
What frustrates me is you hear these sound bites from religious people,
Yeah.
from Christian people, from people that attend houses of worship that may say, it's not about race, it's about grace. It's not about skin, it's about sin. When in fact, it is about skin and it is about race.
Yep.
Because race and skin is what is being punished and executed on camera in America right now. How do you reconcile the difference between sin and ignorance?
Well, it's never mattered before, sir, because we've been allowed to say ignorant things as powerful white people, and nobody said anything.
Do you think that some white people are afraid to lose control, afraid to lose power? If I have to go lend a helping hand to a black person, if I have to go fight for equality, I may lose my position of power. Is that real?
It's more real than I even want to tell you, because that's there was a minister who is of a completely different faith sect, and I won't even bring the name up because it'd be controversial, but he's on record years ago on a talk show. He said, some of y'all white people are worried about us getting power because you think if we did, we would treat people like you have. And he hit it on the head. And I think there are some people that are afraid of losing. They're afraid of sacrificing.
I heard a response to that. What are we thinking?
Well, that's accurate.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of alluding to when we talk about the other side, right? Being the oppressor means that something there is holding me up. And what we do sometimes is we're threatening to remove that. And that's a real thing, right? And so when we have discussions or conversations about these things, or if we have any type of other difficult conversations, we often hear both sides, but then there also comes a point where we kind of have to coddle almost certain things and say, hey, this is going to be all right. Right. And so to that other pastor's point who says, hey, even if I got, or that people were afraid of someone gonna treat them the same way that they were treated, when the conversation is being had, we need to talk about those things, right? Hey, this is not gonna happen. This is not the intent. This is not what we want to happen. But again, some of the times we focus on that other side, and that's it. And that's where the conversation ends.
Right. And someone in the chat said, yes, all about power, church politics, etc. We don't want to be uncomfortable. So losing the power is the big fear. And not just in church, but corporate America. I mean, just in society as a whole, especially as the demographics change in the United States too. I'll just add that.
And I want to
There was a comment.
There's a comment about that there's many episodes on uncomfortable conversations with a black man. This is a really, I think, good series. And you can look it up on YouTube. Our particular conversation was pertinent to our conversation tonight, but he has an array of conversations. So I really urge everyone to check it out.
Right, and a book as well.
And there was a comment earlier from Maritza regarding the concept of recharging once a week at church. How can we recharge knowing that while we recharge, others are suffering? Any response to that from the panelists?
I'll give Reverend Ford the opportunity because I don't want to monopolize, but I do have thoughts. So
I want to stick in two things that, not about that comment. I read that comment too, great comment. Two things. One has to do with, it's not just a theological, spiritual situation. I mean, we're whole human beings, and what's going on and how our brain has been created. I mean, we are wired to protect ourselves. We that's survival. We are wired for that. And I try to educate my congregation about this because for them to really get, and neurologists, I mean, in the last, 10 years, we know so much more about how we work. And I'm always, I just think the more educated we are about who we are, the more this is going to help us. I wanted to bring that up. The other piece was Cain and Abel just keeps on coming back to me as I'm tonight. Well, who am I? My brother's keeper? And God doesn't say yes or no, but the answer is yes. And that's the whole thing. It's like I'm in my bubble and I'm safe because I'm wired to be safe. And I don't really have to, that's their thing. Poor them. I have sympathy, pity. Again, it's, that's where the faith and the faith community has to help us get above all of that, neurological wiring, as well as this, they're not a part of me. Okay, and the whole unity of God's creation is just something that we don't get yet. Most churches don't get. Unity means me and Jesus. It's like, no. Let's read a little bit deeper. That's it.
Minister Webb?
So
I lost you.
So just the recharging while others are suffering sort of goes to what Reverend Ford just said, that they're not a part of me. They're different. They're on the other side of town. They're not my denomination, right? They don't worship the right way. And so all of those things give us license to miss people, humans. It doesn't hurt either that our social, economic, media apparatus also shields you from seeing those things that would upset you, right? This is Black History Month, so I have to do the obligatory ode to Dr. King, thinking about Birmingham and the dogs and fire hoses, the thing that shocked the consciousness of a nation, right? That's when people said, oh my gosh, this is not who we are. We can't stand for this, right? For our generation, that will be George Floyd, the cop kneeling on the man's neck until he's dead. And now people say, oh my gosh, we have to do something. We have to bring it to the forefront. We have to have these difficult conversations that people in the churches don't want to have. And for some people, because we are wired fight or flight, right? I'm going to protect myself at all costs. And so I would rather keep that out of my door than have to really deal with the challenges of saying I might be a racist. Let me show one last clip. I know it's
Hold on, let me say something. Let me get something in as well, because I do want to address that, because I think that it is an important point about recharging. Because here's something that I found that I've learned, which was really, really simple. We had a program, and it was around Christmas, and we put together some packages to deliver to some of the people who were sick and shut in. And while being tired, taking that to them was something actually that helped me to recharge. So what is it that means? The way that God has us set up is to help others. And we so often think of, hey, I'm going to recharge, so I'm thinking only about me. But when we think about others, we also get recharged. So if my foot is hurting, right, the rest of my body can't function at 100% if I'm ignoring my foot. But when we realize that we are of one body of Christ, and we go out and we help somebody else who might have been hurting or whatever else, then we too will reap the benefits of that. We too will be recharged.
And there was a comment, you can recharge by helping those suffering even in small ways.
There you go.
Comment in
Amen.
the chat.
And Reverend Booker, I just want to say that I think what you elaborated is the heart of what we want to communicate tonight, that
Mhm.
we are one people. Yes, our lower nature may be wired in a
Mhm.
certain way for self-protection. Our higher nature tells us to love every
Serve everyone.
soul. We are one soul. Thank
There
you.
we go. Amen.
Minister Webb,
Yes, last clip.
shall we end with you?
I'm gonna do one more clip.
Okay.
Let's see. Hang on.
You and I talked about Zacchaeus, where Jesus was loathed by the religious community for what? Proximity. He was at the dinner table. He was at the wrong parties. He was hanging out with the wrong people. He was talking to women when they weren't even allowed or even acknowledged as real humans. So if you had to wonder where Jesus would be, you got to go back to your Bible, because he's where hurting people are.
Then how come so many people whose job is to emulate that one man aren't there?
Because it will cost them money, and it will cost them acclaim. It might create enemies. And the problem with American Christianity is we think Jesus said, blessed are the peacekeepers. He said, blessed are the peacemakers. This difference here is the divide in our country. We're here to make peace. That means, what do you have to do? You have to go find war. You have to find trouble. You have to find the hurting in order to bridge this gap.
That's real.
Good.
If you go back to the way in which
All right.
this country was founded,
That last one. We have to go to the places where people are hurting. And we have to, because if we pay attention to Jesus, Jesus was always moving, always going somewhere, upsetting the establishment, bringing new revelation, new understanding, things that didn't make sense. That was Jesus. And that's what our faith requires of us. For my two co-panelists, I thank you for a wonderful evening, but I want to leave you with a question, and I'm curious of your thought. Based on where we are and what we have, what we've seen in our history, is there a reason to hope that we can get this right?
Do you want me to answer that now? Or are you leaving me with that thought to call you later?
No. I want an answer. If you would, I want from both.
Yes, well, I absolutely believe there is hope. Again, I just that whole thing, it is just who I am, right? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And as long as we have one or two people who are willing to pray and come together, even in forums like this, there is hope. There is hope for a nation, right? We can do so many things. Even again, if you start to look at different studies, it's so often they talk about that 80-20 rule, because it's 20% that does the 80%, even in the churches, right? If we continue to have things like this, my goodness, there is so much hope. We can come together, we can have these difficult conversations, and we can be the examples that we need in this world today. And again, not trying to be that person to do it for the entire world, but in the spaces that we're in, because that will go far, because we are all connected, right?
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
so much was articulated tonight about this, about the seeds that we plant, and that we remain faithful and we plant seeds with complete faith that, yes, God is bringing the new creation, absolutely. Absolutely. And we've got to be able to preach that and not just preach it, in conversations with our friends, rather than rolling our eyes and going, oh my gosh, isn't this horrible what's going on, today in our whatever nation, politics. No, I had to wait a minute. Stop rolling your eyes, Diane. Let's be deeper than that. Right. Anyway, thank you.
I want to, Patty's going to wrap everything up for us, but I just want to, I think this is a nice way to end. Thank you for this important in-depth discussion. It seems no surprise we are facing a climate crisis that threatens our planet. Maybe we are beginning to see the need to realize unity and interconnectedness of all creation. Patty?
Very nice. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you. It's a very hopeful conversation.
Thank you everyone for coming. And it just, usually we like to also acknowledge our little committee that puts these programs together every month. Of course, Linda is the program director at the library, and Claire also works at the library. Kerwin and Mamone and myself are also involved in the planning of the programs. We're just volunteers. Did I miss anybody, Linda?
Well, Walter, first of all, and just volunteers is very irksome, but Walter Greason,
volunteers.
Yeah, they're anyway, we could never do this if it was one person alone. So with that said, if anybody is ever interested, please do send me an email and let me know if you'd like to participate. It doesn't mean that you have to be on a committee and, always be working with us, but anything at all that you're interested in sharing, please do. And
we're always looking for ideas for future programs. Our March 31st program will be by Rick Gefkin, who's a local author and historian. He has just come out with a book, Stories of Slavery in New Jersey. He is working with Dr. Walter Grayson in creating the Slavery Index for the state of New Jersey, where they're gathering all the data they can find on the history in New Jersey.
Dr. Grayson is also on our committee.
Yes.
Yes.
So thank you everyone for hanging in. Thank you, Claire. That was wonderful. Thank you,
You're welcome.
panelists.
Thank you,
everybody.
And thank you for all the attendees and the chat comments. You're very welcome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you next month. Same time, same station.
Same bat channel.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.